And I was just thinking, like, I'd love to be in the meeting at Warner Brothers. I'm like, Chris, how's production going on Oppenheimer? We'd love to see like how you're getting on. He's like, so I'm currently splitting my own atom in New Mexico.
The burn of the goggles around his eyes, and his hair standing on end. We've done a couple of tests.
So you and I had a little fun Monday night. We went to the premiere of The Witcher Blood Origin. It was at the BFI South Bank. They sort of transformed it into an old-style fantasy medieval tavern.
Yes, with a guy playing the lute.
Yes, there's a mandolin.
Yeah, was it mandolin? Was it not a lute?
I think so. Oh, what is? Oh, I thought it was a mandolin with the bent back of the guitar.
I thought that was a lute.
Old music, just old of that, and lots of Witcher-style potions, like sort of neon blue and green cocktails,
and the beer steins
with the little corks that go.
Oh yeah,
and then you sort of have a little drink.
And the bubbling potions, yeah. And as someone who adores savoury pastry and meats, I liked the sausages, I liked the steak and kidney pies, also
raclette of cheese.
These stink. I mean, brave choice, Netflix.
Yeah,
there was the pong of raclette.
You walk in and it hits you in the face, like there is cheese here, good sir.
Also, it's a brave thing to have because as soon as you eat it, you're like, I am now the stinker of cheese.
Yes, yeah.
Speak to me if you dare.
As long as you're not the only one. But yeah, they do that thing where they scrape the top layer of melted cheese onto your plate with like potato and meats. And you can follow at PULP KITCHEN Podcast on Instagram if you want to see the highlights of that.
Yes, there was that funny moment where you have about an hour of chit chat before the premiere. Then afterwards, you get back in and the food's still there. And I was like, the raclette station is still there. Has that cheese
just been
sat?
sitting there after it's already been heated up on and off continuously?
Are they going to reheat it again? No, I'm sure all the cheese protocols were followed.
And then there were like this sort of maidens with beer. Would you like beer? And I was like, oh yes, thank you.
Yes, and I was unsure about the level of fancy that they were buying into. Is it going to be like if I whip out my phone, they'll be like, my Zunes, what sorcery is this?
I always feel bad asking them a question because they have to stay in character. Yeah. I'm always like, I don't want to ask them too many because I just don't want you to feel like you need to hold this up. But like, I had a good time.
It was what we needed on a cold. If you're listening to this in the UK is currently experiencing a massive cold snap. It's a bit of a cold snap. It's like the opposite of a heat wave. You get a cold snap. But it's not much of a snap. It's a longer snap. It's about a week now.
Yeah,
snow
freezing.
-3. It's currently probably -1 outside. I know we have some listeners in like Sweden and
keep going. That's fine.
I know we have some listeners in like Sweden and Denmark where it actually gets cold. But yeah. Anyway, that was something to warm us up.
Yeah, I had fun with that.
Also, it's Christmas time, as most of our listeners will be aware.
Please see my jumper.
Yes, your jumper is kind of Christmassy. It's kind of like Christmas white noise.
We talked about, yes, it is, like static. We talked about films last week that are, there are some Christmas films, but there are some films that are Christmassy, but not Christmas films.
Yes.
This is this jumper.
Yes.
It's Christmassy, but not a Christmas jumper.
Also, there are films that are set at Christmas. There's a third category to that. There are films that are set at Christmas, but are absolutely got nothing to do with Christmas.
Yes.
See Iron Man 3.
Yes.
There's Morven Caller, which begins, it's a Lynn Ramsey film. Morven Caller begins with her looking at her boyfriend who's just committed suicide by the flashing lights of the Christmas tree. And I'm like, okay.
The films of Shane Black typically
always typically set at Christmas. Lethal Weapon 1 is set in Christmas, but doesn't really have much to do with Christmas.
But yeah, I've got a little Christmas number on. Guys, as always, if you're just listening and missing out on the visuals, go to YouTube/PULP KITCHEN Podcast. If you're on Spotify, flick the video on, have a little look.
I'm sure next year after the release of Avatar 2, we'll have to be doing this in 3D because that'll return.
That will become the default media
for podcasts.
For everything.
No, I bring up Christmas because I just wanted to, I was reminded of something the other day. As it's Christmas, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago about those books you get, 1,001 movies to see before you die. And every year it gets reprinted with the most recent big film posted on the front, right? So it reminded me that actually I not only have one of those books, but how I got it was a complicated story. So at the beginning of my girlfriend's relationship, it was our first Christmas, okay?
Big one.
And
you got permission to tell this story?
I guess, absolutely. Yeah, it does me a disservice. So it's an insult to me, and I think it's time I got this story. So I'm at her house, and I don't know, we're going through a cupboard or a wardrobe or something, and she opens it, and that book, 1,001 Movies to See Before You Die, is there. Now, unbeknownst to me, that's my Christmas present for this year, right, that she got me. I, being a total tool, which I am, saw it, didn't think, oh, maybe she's got this to me for Christmas and she's forgotten to hide it. Just go, why'd you have that? And in a very snobbish way, which I thought at the time, recently graduated film student, I went, why'd you have that? That's something you give to people who know nothing about film. And then she was like, cool. So secretly crushed on the inside.
Yeah.
She then didn't give me that for Christmas because she was too embarrassed. And that then sat at her house for years. Anyway, like, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago, we're at her house again, going through some stuff. And I'm like, why do you have this book on your bookcase? Why do you have a 2016 version of the 1001 Movies to See Before You Die? She's like, well, do you not remember that I had that book? I bought that for you as a nice Christmas present. And you had said, and I said, did I? Anyway, I've actually never really read one of those books. And I flicked it open. And lo and behold, it's actually very interesting.
It's great.
And really informative. And particularly because we've had emails recently about how to connect with film history and the wider film debates and just a wider context of how to watch films.
Yeah.
That book is not only
broken up by decade as well.
Totally,
really nice.
not that book is not only useful; it's almost essential. So I completely take back what I say.
Really great brief little bits from critics and author journalists.
Absolutely, and I now have that book on my bookcase, and I do
Proudly.
flick through it. And like, you know, we're going to be talking about Avatar later, and I did flick open the Avatar page just to read through what we're saying. So I want to say that I'm no longer that much of a snob. I've learned the error of my ways. Those books are actually quite helpful. And if you haven't had one, or you're thinking about getting one, or you do have one, good on you, because that's the way to go to.
And I guarantee there's a load of stuff in the section from the 1940s that is brilliant that you haven't heard of. So go and check it out. So I saw this news story which I found quite funny, which is that, did you hear that Christopher Nolan, in the production for Oppenheimer, has been trying to, or he refuses to do a nuclear bomb CGI.
Yes.
So he is like splitting the atom and doing nuclear fusion his own way. And I just like, and it's just so Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect little bit of like Nolan-esque buzz before his film. Because like for Tenet, it was crashing the plane into the air hangar. Yeah. Dark Knight Rises, like actually like doing that bit with the plane. It's always a plane.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking like, I'd love to be in the meeting at Warner Brothers. I'm like, Chris, how's production going on Oppenheimer? We'd love to see like how you're getting on. He's like, so I'm currently splitting my own atom in New Mexico.
The burn of the goggles around his eyes. His hair standing on end. We've done a couple of tests.
But we could just, CG. No. I would like to know.
Do you think that someone at Warner Brothers escalates it to the higher level, and that the CIA have to come in and say, like, we've heard that you want to actually detonate a nuclear bomb.
He's like, in
it's
New
perfectly
Mexico.
Possible. It's Chris.
The honest, reaction of nuclear fusion is something that I cannot really justify in trying to do digitally. He just refuses to do anything not practically.
But surely, what they're going to do? They're going to do lots of big explosions, not a nuclear one.
Yeah, I mean that would be crazy.
That would be insane. Who? Because what ever went wrong? What happened? Oh, sorry. You know that film director? Yeah, we kind of gave him a nuclear bomb. You what? Yeah, and he just got the coordinates wrong.
It's just Cillian Murphy in New Mexico, just standing next to it, going, "What have we done?
This is my last film." Yeah. No, I had heard that story because I saw a clip on TikTok where they'd cut the scene from Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull where he hides in the fridge, and it's like extras when Christopher Nolan yells action, and they're like, "Oh shit!" Madness. So, but what? So he's trying as hard as he can to not do it in CGI.
He said, "I think recreating the Trinity test without the use of computer graphics was a huge challenge to take on," said Nolan. Andrew Jackson, my visual effects supervisor, I got him on board early on, was looking at how we could do a lot of the visual elements of the film practically, from representing quantum dynamics and quantum physics to the Trinity test itself, to recreating with my team Los Alamos up on Mesa in New Mexico in extraordinary weather, a lot of which was needed for the film. In terms of the very harsh conditions out there were huge practical challenges. Yeah! Sounds
you don't
like
say.
He also says it's one of the most challenging projects I've ever taken on in terms of the scale of it, in terms of encountering the breadth of Oppenheimer's story. There were big logistical challenges, big practical challenges, but an extraordinary crew, and they really stepped in. It'll be a while before we're finished, but certainly as I watch the results come in and I'm putting the film together, I'm thrilled with what my team has been able to achieve.
Right. Very quickly read there by you.
Yeah, I went through it. If you didn't know, Oppenheimer is Nolan's next film, which is going to be about Oppenheimer, who's the father of the Manhattan Project.
Robert Oppenheimer.
Yeah, J. Robert Oppenheimer?
Oh, maybe it's J. Robert.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, he's one of those old-fashioned people, like
F.
Scott Fitzgerald.
Yes, J.R.R. Tolkien.
F. Murray Abraham.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Of course, yeah. This is a new film, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Always.
It's also starring Robert Downey Jr. and
he's got the best of the best, as always.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Comes out the same opening weekend as Barbie.
Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, Rami Malek. Jake and Josh star Josh Peck.
Okay. Yeah.
It's spherical. Spherical.
I don't know. Not Jake and Josh.
Jake and Josh reference. There we go. Just thought I'd throw that out.
Brilliant. So James, they're talking about Christopher Nolan and ambition and cinema.
Big movies.
Brings us nicely onto Avatar. So obviously, Avatar: Way of the Water is opening right now. It is the film of the moment, the sequel to Avatar 2009.
The Way of the Water.
No, not The Way of the Water. It's just Way of the Water.
I beg your pardon.
I keep saying The Way of Water. It's not a great title, okay? You know how I struggle with those, like House of Dragon? Okay?
Yes,
House
yeah,
of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon.
I'm not the definite article always throws me off. Anyway, Avatar 2, Way of the Water.
You just staring at a bus, being like, another definite article.
It's finally here, and with its arrival, I thought it was a proper opportunity for you and I to reacquaint ourselves with the first Avatar. And why, you ask? Because, well, Avatar still remains as the biggest selling film of all time, okay? It has been seen by a lot of people, and it's coming back. So if you haven't seen Avatar for a while, this is an opportunity for you to reacquaint yourself before you go and watch the sequel. If you haven't seen Avatar at all, well, good on you for managing to avoid it somehow over the past 13 years.
It must have been a protest.
And maybe we can fill you in on what you've missed, or maybe you really love the film and you've always wanted to know what we think about it. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to reacquaint ourselves. So James, I'm going to cast you back to the halcyon days. Well, not halcyon days, actually. Cast you back to the dizzying past of 2009, which is a very specific time ago because 13 years is simultaneously not that long ago, but also a long time ago.
And in the landscape of cinema feels like a really long time ago,
In that time, franchises have been born, died, been rebooted, and died again. We've had 2 different Spider-Men and a film in which those 2 Spider-Men come together and are in something in that time, okay? So, 2009 was a long time ago. Let me give you a couple of things.
3 Batmen.
Yes, we have had 3 Batmen in that time. Very good. Here are a couple of things that happened in 2009. Russia shut off all the gas supply to Europe because of something that happened in Ukraine. Happened in January 2009.
Wow.
The Captain Phillips hijacking happened.
Oh, like the actual
Captain Phillips hijacking.
So we've since had our own movie with Tom Hanks. And that film is now on.
The swine flu pandemic of 2009.
My God.
Small change compared to what we know now.
Nothing like coughing in the corner of a classroom at school and everyone going, Macy's got swine flu, I'm not sitting next to him.
Michael Jackson died. Sully, hero on the Hudson, landed the plane on the Hudson.
And we've also had a Tom Hanks movie.
We've also had a Tom Hanks movie about that, yeah.
Please give me another one where Tom Hanks has been the star.
That is some of the things on 2009. And also, just to really, really put this thing in context, the official song of this film was sung by none other than Leona Lewis. X Factor winner, I want to say, of 2007.
For anyone non... UK listeners.
For our non-UK listeners.
Winner of the X Factor, but I don't think it's done much outside of that.
I think she's moved into acting now.
Okay.
But yes.
Leona Lewis.
I know, Leona Lewis. And I know when I heard it, when we rewatched it, I was like, Jesus, wow, Leona Lewis. So yes, James and I have gone back and we've rewatched Avatar. We've refreshed our memories and we're going to go through and give it to you. So a little bit of facts about Avatar before we begin. Did you know that work on Avatar began in 1994, the early 90s? James Cameron,
as old as we've been alive.
That's a scary thought, isn't it? Wow. James Cameron, fresh off the back of Terminator 2, great film, of course, as we know, and pioneering CGI in that, wanted to create this. He wrote an 80-page treatment for what would become Avatar, and it drew inspiration from, as he said, every single science fiction book he had read, and in addition to the adventure novels of people like Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote Tarzan, and also John Carter, which is funny because John Carter of Mars, which would then be made into a film just called John Carter, which would massively bomb, but clearly influenced by Avatar and the success of that. There's a 1996 article I found in the Tampa Tribune, I believe. Let me just open this. Yeah, a 1996 article from the Tampa Bay Times, which says, synthetic actors to star in Avatar. Director James Cameron is planning a movie with synthetic actors. Avatar is expected to include at least 6 photorealistic CGI actors in leading roles. Actors who appear to be real but do not exist in the physical world. Digital Domain, the special effects house in which Cameron is a partner, is staffing up for the huge effort, which is can I finish the sentence?
Yeah.
Which is expected to go into production next summer, following the completion of the director's current $100 million project, Titanic.
Yeah.
Avatar's budget will probably be in the same range. James,
I was just going to say, so you talk about like digital actors, it's almost like not even referencing motion capture
Yes,
yet.
they
It's
do.
like a purely digital performance.
The way they conceive of such a thing.
Yeah.
While computer-generated creatures have been used effectively in films, including Jurassic Park, Jumanji, and Dragonheart, anyone? Filmmakers using computer animation have yet to put anything remotely human on the big screen. Cameron is determined to do so. Also on this film news page from that day, is Michael York and Robert Wagner have joined Mike Myers and Elizabeth Hurley in the action-adventure comedy Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Oh, wow.
I know.
I quite like just seeing that little slice of what else was there, yeah.
So that was news about it was led. Then obviously James Cameron goes and makes Titanic, huge success, then becomes the biggest film of all time, big win at the Oscars, and he's on top of the world. But, Avatar is meant to be the film that he makes after that, to be released in about 1999. But of course, James Cameron, looking ahead, realizes that the technology is not right for it, so he
Sits on it
and works patiently. So apparently in 2005, he started to develop the language of the Na'vi, and in 2006, the script development began, and he started to build the universe. Now, Avatar has apparently had an official budget in 2009 of, when it was made, of $237 million.
Which for the time is
massive. Even now it's massive. Huge, but back then it's huge. But this does not include the estimated $150 million used for marketing.
Right. Yeah.
He quickly incorporated Weta Digital, which is the New Zealand, Wellington-based visual effects company.
Probably the biggest name in special visual effects.
I mean, the pioneers of visual effects in modern cinema, Lord of the Rings, King Kong, etc., etc. Yeah. And yes, James Cameron and with Weta really pioneered motion capture, which is a phrase we're so used to now, but before Avatar we really weren't.
Well, I would say Smeagol and Lord of the Rings kind of beat them to it, but we can get onto that.
But I think that entering common parlance with your average film goer knowing what motion capture means, right? Which is obviously where you have these specially designed cameras, which and it says here Cameron actually pioneered a specially designed camera built into a 6-inch boom that allowed the facial expressions of the actors to be captured and digitally recorded for the animators to use later, which we know of.
And if you've ever seen a BTS, you'll often see an actor with what looks like a GoPro in front of their face with a bunch of dots, which are then mapped digitally. So every movement is essentially keyframed into a digital performance.
We're very familiar with motion capture now, particularly with things like the Planet of the Apes films and Andy Serkis's work.
A lot of Marvel stuff.
So it has now become a part of the arsenal of
gaming
filmmaking
as well, performance capture,
Absolutely, it's part of the arsenal of filmmaking in the same way that CGI became
things like Jungle Book as well, Lion King, Animals. Yeah, sorry, endless.
Anyway, okay, so during its theatrical run, the film was released, by the way, in December 2009. First in London and then in the United States. During its theatrical run, the film broke several box office records and became the highest-grossing film at the time, as well as in the United States and Canada, surpassing Cameron's Titanic, which had held those records for 12 years. So he beat himself. Good on you. What a win-win.
He's doing all right.
Avatar remained the highest-grossing film in the world for nearly a decade until it was overtaken by Avengers: Endgame in 2019. But a Chinese re-release of Avatar led to the film retaking the worldwide top spot in March 2021, where it has been ever since. Adjusted for inflation, this is always the key thing people forget about a great box office smash. Adjusted for inflation, Avatar is the second highest grossing movie of all time after Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, this
1939 Gone with the Wind.
Actually.
But isn't that amazing that still Gone with the Wind was just... I would have loved to have just been a fly on the wall. 1939, how much that film just sort of took over and
without film podcasts and social media to permeate in that way.
Hey, it's Clark Gable here. We just dropped this new film.
Welcome back to this new film coming out in 1939. Gone with the Wind is taking away, storming through audiences. They are saying
I'm here with incorporated into cinemas, and the 2010s, especially the early 2010s, can be typified by the cinema experience being dominated by 3D. And if you grew up in that time like you and I did, James, we're used to hearing Mark Kermode really, really hold 3D to account as something that was being marketed as sort of enhancing the cinema experience, but he would point out how it absolutely wasn't. 30% loss.
It's often a more expensive ticket.
Yeah.
It was harder to find 2D screenings. You go on your website and you would see film 3D, film 2D, and like you'd often have fewer options to see it in 2D because they were incentivized to sell you the 3D ticket because you had to pay £1.50 for the glasses, whatever.
Yeah, and also it was one thing to see Avatar, which was like very, very
Shot in 3D.
Intentionally designed to be like that. Whereas other films would just do like every so often there'll be something flying towards you. And do you know what? When I rewatched the first Guardians of the Galaxy, so that's 2014. There were a couple of moments in that I'm like, that was done deliberately for 3D to come towards the screen.
If you don't know, in order to actually, when you shoot a film in 3D properly, you use a camera that has two different lenses which are bounced on a periscope. So you're actually shooting it twice on two different sensors, which are then digitally matched to like roughly the same framing as the eyes on your face. And that's what creates good 3D. Like Gravity, which I think is another example of good 3D, was shot like that. If you don't do that, you're essentially taking your film, which you shot with one lens and standard, doubling it and just making it slightly out of sync like you would your eyes and then rematching it with glasses. So it is a completely different technical process. So yeah.
When was the last time you saw a film in 3D, by the way? Because I used to always avoid it. I never liked it, but I remember going to see Blade Runner 2049 in 2017 and the only screening I could get was 3D. And did it make a difference? I mean, it didn't help it. It didn't make the film any better, no.
For the life of me, I actually can't remember the last one. It could well have been a Marvel project at the time that was still getting 3D, but I can't tell you which one.
I saw Prometheus in the IMAX as well with 3D glasses.
Yeah.
The film.
No, I don't remember. I'm quite glad to say I don't really remember.
Okay, so let's just... Obviously, getting to Avatar, most people know this film, of course, but just to recap for everyone, it is set on the I think it's a moon, isn't it, of Pandora. No, it's not Jupiter. It's no, it's not. That's not Jupiter. No, it's different. It looks like Jupiter.
Oh,
but it's just that. Well, first of all, that's blue. That planet, James, and Jupiter is famously red.
Oh, I thought it was no.
No, it's not.
Pandora is a moon of Jupiter, is it not?
No, it's in the Alpha Centauri system, it says.
Oh, okay, forget it then. I thought it was really nearby.
Set in the mid 22nd century, it stars Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang. Sam Worthington plays Jake Sully, who is a former Marine who can no longer use his legs and is sent out on this mission in replacement of his twin brother, who was a scientist who got killed.
Part of a very expensive Avatar project.
Very expensive Avatar project to basically inhabit the body of a genetically enhanced
and he can only do it.
A genetically enhanced version of the native people of Pandora, the indigenous people of Pandora, the Na'vi, in a hope to build relations, and because humans are on this planet to mine it for unobtainium, which when I first saw this, I was like, that's a joke name, right? And it is, in science, it is a joke name, but they say this with a complete straight face.
Well, it was a working title for the element.
And then they just left it.
And then they just let's just leave it.
Yeah, so unobtainium, this mineral that apparently can, solve everything.
Sells for $22 million a kilo. That's the cheddar.
Giovanni Ribisi being the corporate sleaze. Yeah, I know. I guess,
I love her
what's his name?
talks.
Sam Rockwell was busy that day.
Literally.
Anyway, obviously, so he's working for the science program, but then Stephen Lang, who's the head of security as Quadrich, says, he's one cigar away from being a cigar chomping.
He's like a squinty, hardened,
scar-faced, coffee sipping,
you got
1,000-yard stare.
Soft. Yes, I'll get you legs back.
And says to him, look, you need to give me some intel on what's happening on this planet.
Well, he's sort of working for Sigourney Weaver, but
because he's a former Marine, Stephen Lang says, do this for me, and I'll get you your legs back. Yeah. And he says, okay, cool. And off he goes on this adventure where he encounters the Na'vi, and it's Pocahontas, it's Dances with Wolves, it is all of that stuff, and cue culture conflicts, cue economic and environmental sort of themes and themes of capitalism,
connecting
themes of colonialism, themes of American military imperialism.
Beyond understanding that nature seems to operate on a much higher, more complex sphere that we're not currently in touch with because of the technology that we have.
Absolutely.
And the pursuit of profit. Really sort of big themes you would have seen in many
science
big
fiction
films.
themes. Like I said, James Cameron said he had drawn his inspiration from every single science fiction book he'd ever read, and I think it shows. But look, it's been 13 years since Avatar came out, and I saw it in 2014 for the first time at home.
Yeah.
And I've now watched it again for the second time in 2022. You saw it at the cinema in 2009, and you said you've watched it once more since then?
Yeah, saw it in cinema in 2009, and then I would have rewatched it within 2 years, either at home on Sky. Yeah, I think probably just like at home on TV. Yeah.
So you and I have both rewatched it ahead of the release of the sequel. James, Avatar 2009. What do you make of it now?
I think I want to throw back to a conversation you and I had probably 6 months ago when the first trailer dropped for Avatar 2. And I think, like, you know, we commented on the fact that it kind of looked like a screensaver. Yes, it's very pretty. But I think we were almost like re-remembering that Avatar existed. And I think I was like, what is the Avatar effect? What is it about that film that did so well? I do kind of understand what did so well, why it did so well. And, you know, we put a clip out and I think a lot of comments were quite negative about Avatar. And I think if I was to sort of generalize everyone's opinion, I think Avatar gets quite a hard rap because it is the biggest film of all time. And we talked about the themes of it being quite broad strokes, fairly on the nose. It's nothing we haven't, it's a lot of things we've seen before. And watching it this time.
In terms of plot and narrative.
In terms of plot and narrative. And the fact that, you know, Jake Sully really is a blank vessel for anyone to sort of put themselves on. He's like this, the video game character you haven't, you know, started customizing yet.
Which is exactly what I think of Sam Worthington as an actor as well. Okay.
Yeah, he really is.
No disrespect. But.
And look, my main overriding thought is it's not as bad as I thought going back into it. Like, being quite honest, I didn't think this is really awful. I think what still you cannot take away from it is that the facial capture digital performances are still fantastic. There's a couple of moments where I thought Sigourney Weaver looked a little bit rubbery, but like, I will not take away from the fact that seeing this in cinemas, which I obviously didn't do this time, would no doubt have still been an amazing thing to watch. It showed you something you hadn't really seen before visually, and I think its visual effects, maybe 80% of the time I watched it, still hold up, and I cannot say that for almost all films that would have come out in 2009. So for that, I do credit it, and I've no doubt Avatar: Way of the Water is going to do the exact same. That being said, plot-wise and dialogue, I think since has progressed. I was a little bit.
I think it was already.
It was already kind of.
You could already get, you know, getting good dialogue and getting good script writing has been around for 50,
we've had that
past 50 years.
Yes. I forgot how much it relies on voiceover and the Jake Sully vlogs, the sort of scientific research. And he's like, what?
Very contrived reasons.
Why am I doing this? It's like, and he's like, it's important. It's part of the documenting process.
Because we need to tell the audience what's going on.
And you tell the audience exactly how I'm feeling and what I should be thinking. I think there are a couple of scenes which I think are good scenes. I think there's a cool scene when he gets into the Avatar for the very first time and he realizes he's using his legs. Like, that's really cool. And he goes and he runs outside and he squidges his toes in the soil and he's like genuinely elated and laughing. I think that's a really great scene. And I think the destruction of Home Tree is something that even watching now, I was like, God, that really sucks. I really liked that place. I still think it's a long and slightly indulgent film, but I didn't dislike it nearly as much as I thought when you and I said we were going to rewatch it.
Do you know what? I think I had a very similar experience because when I went to rewatch it now, I was watching it very much in the context of what blockbusters are now.
Yeah.
And I think in that comparison, in that context, I think actually Avatar holds up relatively well. First of all, in terms of the visual effects that we've seen in 2009 with this film, compared to the visual effects we've seen this year in, let's just say, Marvel films, hold up very well. Obviously, VFX this year has been under a massive amount of scrutiny because there's been all these stories about how there's been a massive crunch on visual effects artists and they are being overworked, underpaid.
There are more and more projects with not an expanding workforce that are all done in.
Look at the articles and the fan reactions that come out all the time to projects like She-Hulk or Sonic the Hedgehog, just these sort of cats, these reactions to, oh my God, what is happening with these movies and the rejection of it. Compared to what was happening 13 years ago with what's in Avatar, I thought it held up very, very well. Yeah. Like you said, I think apart from maybe one or two moments, I thought this is really, really solid. I think the thing, when you mentioned about the video game stuff, I think Avatar is the best video game adaptation.
That's not a video game adaptation.
Yeah. And I mean that in that, it's funny that it's called Avatar because, like you said, Jake Sully, Sam Worthington, is the avatar for the audience, and he is a complete really blank slate. And that is a problem cinematically because he's a complete reactive blank presence, which means I have nothing to hook me in and work with. The thing with him getting his legs back is probably the only emotional element that can really bring you in.
He thinks and feels in all the ways you could imagine him thinking and feeling. Yes. There's nothing he does that really takes you by surprise from a character perspective.
But the thing about it being a video game also extends to, like, there are certain moments that feel like elaborate cutscenes in a cinema.
Yeah, sure.
Specifically the scene where he first meets Neytiri, who's Zoe Saldana's character, and she sort of picks him up and says, "Hey, come with me." And he sort of goes, "Okay." And I can imagine there was almost like a bit that on the screen that says like tap X now, tap X to run. And he walks over a branch and there's a chasm on either side. He sort of goes, "What? What?" And the camera sort of like pans either side to show you how far off. And I'm like, I've seen this in a video game, right?
Yeah.
So that's all there.
And everything upgrades. Like he starts with the horse and then he learns how to fly.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, today your mission is linking with a thing. Like,
Sahelu.
So I mean, let's get all the negative stuff out of the way, like you said before. So yeah, it's still too long.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's just the biggest thing working against it is its runtime. Still got an absolute banter black hole charisma vacuum at the heart of it, which is Jake Sully. Jake Sully. The dialogue is so instructional, expositional, over-directed.
Sigourney Weaver's dialogue is a lot of that.
It's hi, we're doing this because we're here, and I'm here, and I've been doing this for this long, and you're here to do this, and you want to do that, which is... a complete lack of nuance that really gives the audience nothing to do.
Yes.
It gives you nothing to engage with because it doesn't allow you to make connections between what people are saying.
There's no way where I go, hang on.
It's the equivalent of a training video. Yeah. I'm watching it like, so, hi. Well, and I've been to the Avatar ride in Florida.
Right, for you,
which I enjoyed, but it made me feel quite sick. But which again is like, hi, welcome to the ride. Welcome to Pandora. You're going to ride an Ikron. I was like, was this written by James Cameron as well?
Yeah, I'm sure.
So all of that's there. However, what I will say did stand out watching it in the context of 13 years later, is I did come away with actually a little bit of respect for this film, because this is obviously one of those, it's a film that's all about ambition and vision and spectacle, and compared to the very visual CGI-led blockbusters that we see currently, I was really appreciated or respected the complete clarity of its vision. Okay.
Yeah.
And that extends to the dialogue. Now, that dialogue is absolutely expositional, instructional, and dull. But what it also is, that film has an answer for everything. Its dialogue is, why are we doing this? Well, because we got this. And why do we want to do this? Oh, we want to do this. And we're going over there because of this. And I never felt for any moment during the film that it didn't know where it was going.
To waste your time. I mean, it is a long time, but
it is a long purpose. The scene, it's very pacey, and it begins, it's like, hi, we're here, we're doing this, and it is a mission. So in a way, the only thing about it is that it's overtold. I can really feel James Cameron being like, this is what we're doing this, and he's basically running you through the minutiae of everything in a way that you think, James, this is great. You can step back a bit and let me come on board now. But I just feel like there have been, with big budget films recently, you get this wearying sense of where am I? What is all this for? And actually, I always thought this film knows exactly where it's going. It's going to give me a complete story. Take Dune as an example, right? Because I was thinking, what other film have I seen that's really tried to build a new world and build a new aesthetic? And Dune did that very well. Completely new aesthetic, completely new look for science fiction. But my biggest problem with Dune was that it didn't complete a story. I know it's part one, but like it just obeyed like a scientific law of storytelling, which is
it's hard to review it.
You didn't, yeah. It's like a video game where the last mission is downloadable content. It just wasn't. But Avatar, I knew was going to give me a whole story the whole way through, and it committed to give it to me. And it gave me a full arc, right? If there was never another Avatar sequel, it's fine because you had a complete story there. I think Zoe Saldana is great. Yeah. I mean, looks great compared, because obviously she's working against an absolute blank slate that is Jake Sully. And like I said, I don't think it's all Sam Worthington's fault. He's just working with what he's given. Yeah. But so Zoe Saldana is really, you can really see her expressions in them. That's when I was like, oh, this technology is fantastic, because it's really capturing the movement in her face. And yeah, I really respected that I'm being shown a vision of a world that is relatively original, and an aesthetic that is relatively original. This, saturated blues, these soaring vistas, and
it knows how to make a color contrast between when you plug into the Matrix and when you're in that sterile green-gray technology lab.
It's like James Cameron said, I'm going to build a new world, and I'm like, well, you have, well done. Yeah. It might be intellectually a little bit dumbed down, sadly, but I fully respect the fact that you've committed to building a world with a language and everything, and on a big screen in 2009. I mean, look, there have been some comments online that say, it was just after the economic crash. This is just complete escapism and pure cinema. So great for that.
I just on that, I definitely noticed, I think I was impressed by how dedicated it was in the first half especially to world building. Not just in the dialogue, which is a little bit heavy-handed, a little bit on the nose, but everything is like, you got to do this. Even the character who is the scientist who's been training, and he's kind of cynical of Jake because he's just jumping into it, and Jake's getting more success connected to the RV. And he's like, even though he's still explaining stuff, I'm like, all of this is establishing why you're doing it. And even the wide shots are like showing you context, like, oh look, there is like this mass militarization and this like expectation they're gonna go in. And I kind of was like, like every part of your energy is put towards building the world, which I can tell you've really worked on for a long time. It never came across like it's just been thought up immediately.
Yeah, that's it.
I believe that James Cameron has got way more to write about this. Whether or not I'm interested in it is another question. But like, you went for it.
Considering that Avatar was not a pre-existing IP, the biggest trap this thing it would have fallen into is it being too obscure to people. Yeah. And people would have gone, I just don't get this. If anything, it's like overcorrected and it's made it so broad and accessible that everyone can get on board. I mean, it worked in its favor because it became the biggest selling film of all time. So hats off to it.
And then structurally, it mirrored Titanic because you had an hour and a half, bang, destruction of home tree, iceberg hits, hour and a half to the end, give or take. It's like two halves of the film.
So, I mean, there's a couple of nice touches, like Sigourney Weaver. He was nervous about casting her because he thought she was in Aliens, obviously, which he made, and had like her attachment to that. But he did put her in, and actually, he was thinking about casting Michael Biehn, who played Hicks in Aliens, and Kyle Reese in Terminator, as Quadrich, but he was like, that's just too much aliens in there right now. I'm not making a tribute video to my previous work.
I think Stephen Lang's really good as well. Like, really menacing. Oh, great. You're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, he brings the requisite amount of like grit and groundedness.
They are very hard to kill. I sound like JFK.
Yeah, you do sound like JFK. He's not Southern either.
No.
He's just a hard-boiled guy. No, he's not even Southern. What am I doing?
You got 3 months till the dozers get in.
Is he Matthew McConaughey?
No,
now?
I don't know. I'm wandering all over, but there's something there.
I like the battle scenes at the end.
I want to give a shout out to.
There's one element that is a bit poorly directed, has dated. There's when they're like, we're shutting the program down and everything. Not only do they use slow motion, but they desaturate the frame, so it seems really melancholy. And I was like, this reminds me of like emo videos on YouTube in 2009.
Deep sepia. I'll also give shout out to a scene where watching this now, my heart was going, and that's when like classic hero's journey stuff. He's given this huge obstacle to prove that he's a man and that he's one of the people. Where he has to go and choose his... Is
Ikron.
it Ikron. And there's this moment when he realizes that like he has to go and like mount one, essentially like overpower it. And then she's like, how will I know which one chooses me? And she's like, because it will try to kill you. And he's like, outstanding. And he walks through it. And it does this moment, which I never noticed before, where Neytiri is walking in front of him and it goes point of view perspective when Neytiri actually looks right down the barrel of the lens and Jake is there and you're actually walking like POV as if you're right behind Jake with these huge dragons. And I was like, God, I actually noticed that's like first person.
Also another video game.
Another very video game thing. And like how, again, immersive, and I can't imagine, I remember watching that in 3D in the cinema would have also been very cool. And then that moment when he makes the bond and he's got to like immediately fly, I'm like, that scene works and it's immersive. It does get you. And I was like, oh yeah, that was work. That good. My heart's beating.
That's what the ride in Florida is. Right. You're flying an Ikron. No, but can I just, you go into a room which like, it's not like a roller coaster. It's like a row of like bikes. And you go on the bikes and you put these goggles on and they're like, and we're now linking to you to your avatar. So you have this very immersive screen and then the thing moves. And it's obviously, even though you're in a room and you're wearing goggles, but because it's got the first person perspective and you're going down and obviously the machine manipulates that, it really feels, and it was great. I just felt incredibly sick afterwards. And I did it twice. Anyway, so that's what I would say. I would say if people said, oh, what do you think of Avatar? I think it's actually perfectly solid and perfectly enjoyable with the caveat that it's just too long. If it just shaved 20 minutes off, even half an hour, I think that would have been like, oh, that's a perfectly solid time. I didn't have a bad time. It's just kind of like, it's fine. It gets a bad rap, but you know what? If you're going to be the biggest film of all time, you need to be quite accessible. But I do like Endgame as well. Does that deserve a better higher spot? I don't know.
Well, Avatar 2 is, I think, 25 minutes longer than Avatar 1. I think that's 3:14 So he's not gone.
No, he doesn't do small.
Does not do small. And I mean, like, we've sort of covered it, but how are you feeling going into Avatar: Way of the Watcher if you are going to see it?
Well, it's interesting because you and I, when we went to the Witcher thing the other day, we were having a conversation with Ali Plum, who is Radio 1's film critic. For our international listeners, Radio 1, obviously, BBC Radio 1, a main radio station, and Ali Plum is a film critic who works on there. And
we just sort of like bumped into him, sort of asking him what he'd been doing recently, and he was saying like, what his coverage is Avatar.
And we were talking about it, and he said, we were talking about where it sits in the cultural landscape now, because it's been 13 years. And he said, well, I have a nephew, I think he said, who has no idea. It just doesn't get it. And because it's not a comic book, it's not a video game, it's just one film and a ride at Florida. There's nothing else of Avatar in the cultural landscape of the past 13 years. Yeah. And he realized that his nephew was 12. And he was like, of course, this person was born after this film came out. So what does Avatar mean to all these people other than a memory of this big film they saw? So, I mean, for me now going into it,
came out for us perfect age, to be honest.
Right, exactly. So I'm glad I rewatched it. I am more interested now in seeing the sequel, but I do think it's almost like starting again.
Yeah.
You have to prove yourself again. Where it's a completely different world now. It's the world that you created in a way, Avatar, because you had such a profound effect on the way massive big blockbuster films are made. How do I feel about it? The runtime, as with any film, is a massive obstacle. You've
said this so many times. You open yourself up to so much criticism when you do that.
But also, isn't it funny that, like, obviously Avengers Endgame was like 3 hours long, but that was bringing so much, like, you were already invested because it was like it was the season finale.
I had no problems with that being 3 hours.
Because it was the season finale. You were like, they've got so much to cram in. But to be honest,
I was excited that it was long.
To fly back to a world you haven't been to for 13 years and be like, I need you to spend 3.5 hours. And I'm like, okay, with Jake Sully, not the most interesting person. Okay. Yeah.
I think I'm actually more exhausted. I don't know if this is a really reductive point, by the fact that I know there are 4 more of these who are going to be an equal length. It's actually that thought that this isn't like Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is, I want you to now
it's a
really
cynical exercise,
And so I'm just thinking like, God, I really am not in the mood for, as you just said, it's your point, I hope it is a film in its own right. I don't want it to be like, here's part 1 of the next 4.
Because we live in a very competitive media landscape.
Yeah.
And the reason we did that episode many months ago about why greatest 90-minute films is because so I was talking to a friend recently about the BFI Top 10 and we were talking about it. We talked about Whiplash, actually. And one thing I like about Whiplash was that that's a film that is a short film that knows that its audience might have somewhere else to be.
Yeah.
It's a debut film that goes, we don't have time to
Whiplash?
Yeah, exactly. Just like, and that's the beauty of short films. They're like, we understand that people might have somewhere else to be and we can tell this story tightly and concisely. When it gets to 3 hours 15, I'm like, okay, I guess you're just banking on the fact that I'm so in love with this product that I'm just going to give away my time. You and I will see it because we love film and we do a film podcast.
Now we've done this episode.
But I'm
like committing that.
It's a chore.
It's a chore. I feel like it's a chore. And committing that much time at the moment is like a 4-hour commitment of getting there, doing the ads, doing the film, coming out.
Maybe I should do an after
they
cut the ads out. Yeah. But there's going to be like a good 40 minutes of adverts before that because every advertiser is going to be like, that's Avatar. The film. That's the only film that's out.
How long is the cutoff before you need an interval? Because Tarantino treated us to one for Hateful Eight, which was a long film. That was 2:45, wasn't it?
Yeah, but
something
then
like that.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever's 2:45.
Yeah, I know. Do you think there should be just like a courtesy, go take a pee?
When they showed The Irishman in cinemas, did they have an interval there?
I didn't see it in cinema, so I can comment.
No, me neither. I think that...
who knows?
But that was the other thing Ali Plum said. He said that it is an interesting Christmas because, a bit like, I suppose, when The Force Awakens came out, it's just Avatar.
Yeah.
There's no other film coming out. No film's bothering to compete with
No, you might have a rom-com or like something literally the opposite. Oh, can you please tell me?
No. Have you seen some of the initial review headlines? Some of them actually really made me laugh.
Oh, because by the way, on Avatar 2, reviews are really mixed. I saw Empire gave it 5 stars.
Do you know what? I knew that with my eyes closed. I just know that. Empire always would give that film 5 stars.
I've seen 2 and 3 stars. Go on.
Okay. The Telegraph said, Avatar 2 is finally here, and it's like being waterboarded with turquoise cement. The Guardian said, Avatar, The Way of Water, a soggy twee $1 trillion screensaver. I did say it looked like a screensaver in the trailer. It looked like the kind of thing that's playing when you go to the dentist.
Oh, yeah, we said that.
And the Financial Times said, Avatar, The Way of the Water, a sequel drowning in epic sincerity. So very mixed reviews at the moment. TBC, you're right. The knowledge that, because they filmed Avatar 3 simultaneously with some of Avatar 2. They overlapped the filming. So they were filming Avatar 2 and they then began at filming Avatar 3 in 2 different locations.
I thought it was 2, 3, 4 they filmed together. And
no, they
5
haven't done.
I
think they're still working on 4. 4 and 5 are only contingent on the
2's success.
On the 2 and 3 being a massive success. So they were filming 2 somewhere, and they started filming 3 in Wellington at the same time.
Is it going to be? Is the top spot in 10 years going to be Avatars 2, 3, 4, or like is it just going to be that? Is that it?
I don't know.
Who knows? Will see.
Maybe in 10 years' time we'll be like. In the same way,
I'm so excited about Avatar 5. Can't wait.
So, number 3 is coming out 24, then we've got 26 and 28. But like in the same way that 10 years ago, 13 years ago with Avatar, we were like, well, that really changed things. Maybe we'll go, wow, when Avatar came back, that really changed things again and everything had to up its game. And it was no longer Marvel. It was like, wow, you've got to start
doing this podcast in space on Pandora.
Anyway, guys, people,
hopefully there's a little preview
listeners,
for you.
That's a little recap of Avatar from 2009. What do you think of Avatar? Do you agree with us?
I'd say what you think of Avatar Way of the Water by the time.
I'm getting there. I mean, feel free.
Go through.
But I was also going to say yes. And also, now you would have gone to see the sequel. Let us know what you think at hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. We will be doing a review of it. Whether or not James and I are able to see it at the same time or review it at the same time, it is difficult because, as we discussed, it's very long. We're also at that complete bottleneck of the year before Christmas where there is just so much on, so much happening. Please forgive us, but we'll see.
We will cover it on the show.
It will absolutely be covered, and we would really look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions on it. Again, as you know, hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. But that was our recap of Avatar. So before cinemas get completely overrun with Avatar, you've been able to see one other film before that.
Ruben Östlund's Triangle of Sadness.
Yeah, the Palme d'Or winner for this year.
Yeah,
right?
won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Ruben Östlund's a filmmaker, I'll admit, I'm not very familiar with. I know that his film from 2017, The Square, also won the Palme d'Or.
Which I've seen. I've not seen Force Majeure, but The Square I have.
And I think, I'd be interested to go and see other work from this filmmaker. And this film is getting mixed reviews coming out of that accolade that it's won at Cannes. I can definitely see why. I think the most interesting part of this film happens in the beginning, and in the second act, I'm slightly less interested, and in the third act, this film really lost me.
Okay.
It's got a very clear part 1, part 2, part 3 structure. I'm talking like black screen, part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. So it really does, break it up for you. And what we've essentially got is a satire on the ultra wealthy. You've seen the trailer for it, and you know sort of roughly what it's about. So the film actually opens with Carl and Yaya, who are a couple of models / influencers. Carl's played by Harris Dickinson, and Yaya's played by the tragically late Charlie Creek. And what I think this film opens with, which is really interesting, is a dissection of this very toxic and insecure relationship. The film opens with Carl as a model going into this audition with 50 other models in the room, all of whom are topless, all of whom are striving to kind of become the exact same image, but are all uniquely different looking and flawed in very different ways. It shows the humiliating process of what it's like to walk into a model casting room topless while 5 people are just looking at your shots going, oh, this isn't very interesting. And you're just standing there doing a walk, and you do a walk and they go, you're not doing your walk very well. I need you to walk with something else, something different. And then, later the couple go for dinner and they have this conversation about who should pay and why you should pay. And I didn't know you're so obsessed with money. And it's really taking time to actually let you sit with these 2 characters. And I was really kind of interested in the way it was presenting this very flawed, vapid presentation of what that class of people who do that sort of thing might strive to achieve in life. And I'm like, this is actually really interesting. You then, and as you would have seen in the trailer, cut to a bunch of ultra wealthy people going on a mega yacht where you have like maybe 20 ultra rich people all part of this yacht. Though that couple, who the film now actually kind of slightly departs from, are there because they get there to go there for free because they're influencers. And there's almost the sense that they're actually not wealthy enough to be a part of this group, but they are sort of almost like there by proxy of their profession, kind of pretending and aspiring to be a part of this social class. You've got a Russian oligarch on board who says, I sell shit. No, excuse me? He's like, I sell fertilizer for agriculture. But, he's sort of almost like gloating about how he makes his billions selling, fertilizer. You've got someone there who's like a nerdy, fat, balding, overweight, guy who sells code to tech companies and sells this technology for like tens of millions of dollars at a time. You've got an old, cute British couple who sell grenades and arms in war, but they seemingly have no self-awareness for how that might be like really damaging and really destructing to society. It's like, so when the EU regulated those hand grenades out of commission, it was really hard times, wasn't it, darling? Yes, it was really hard times. Yes, but we worked through it in the end. And there's like loads of really great moments where I'm like, this is really funny. And I'll admit, there are actually a couple of moments, even towards the end, where I got really tired of the film, where I did go like, wow, like this is really funny. Yeah. As it stands, I think The White Lotus is still the king of doing the satirization of the ultra wealthy and properly dissecting what it's like to have this divide between those who serve and those who are served. There's some fantastic sequences where you can see them all boarding onto the private jet, and there is this helicopter which is marching towards the yacht, and there is this elite package in this hardened case that is being delivered. It gets dropped down. Someone at sea picks it up. The boat delivers it to the boat. The briefcase gets taken into the kitchen, and the chef opens it up, and it's 3 jars of Nutella. And you're just realizing that like whatever is requested is never too much. And one of the head waiters said, listen, if they ask you to do anything, you say yes. If they ask you for hard drugs, you say yes. If they say jump, you say how high. And there's this uncomfortable scene where this woman who has no self-awareness of the fact that these people serving them are actually people. She says, oh my God, like I feel so bad that I'm swimming. You should swim. I want you all to swim. Tell everyone I want them all to swim. And she's like, no, we can't do that. So then she has to tell every single member of staff on the boat that they have to stop what they're doing. The chef of the kitchen is like, we're all cooking. No, you have to go for a swim because someone wants you to go for a swim. And you have this captain played by Woody Harrelson, who is this drunken American communist who has these arguments over the telecom with this Russian oligarch capitalist, and they're throwing like different bits of philosophical, political prose at each other. And what happens so the second act is on the boat, and the third act is the aftermath of what happens in the boat. And look, I think when I get to the end of this film, it's got a great punchline in a very last scene, which I actually really liked. But zooming out, I can look at the film and go, oh yeah, like that is kind of funny. And there are some like scenes which really stick with me, and there's some really good ideas. But it was a real slog to actually get through those scenes, especially in the third act, where I think the film just becomes a completely new idea, where I was properly bored and properly just thinking, you need to choose one of these, and you're trying to do too much in the film. And I'm in the third act, and I'm looking at some of the decisions or just some of the things that are happening. I'm like, what's happening now? And this is just so strange. It's a completely new idea. I want to give a shout out to the character of Abigail, played by Dolly De Leon. I don't even want to spoil what role she plays yet, but it's sort of, a role reversal on the server and how that power dynamic changed. And I think she's absolutely star of the show, but only really sort of comes into her own in the third act. And yeah, I just think like zoomed out from afar, really funny, really cool idea. What a slog,
Shane,
scene by scene to work through.
Do you find it interesting that we are living in a trend where examinations of the hyper wealthy, the super wealthy, are becoming like common form entertainment? Did you mention The White Lotus? Absolutely.
Yes,
I agree. And we're going to try
actually watching right now, which is why I make a comparison.
So we're near the end of the White Lotus season 2, and we are hoping to do a spoiler catch-up, spoiler review of that if you haven't been watching it as well before the end of the year. You mentioning it, I know you haven't. You mentioning it to Glass Onion. Similarly tackles the super wealth in obviously a completely different genre.
Yes,
but it is still there. Both Knives Out as well, but also particularly Glass Onion. Succession, similarly.
Yeah.
Again, which because of Jesse Armstrong and his background as a writer with Peep Show and the thing.
And there's this element of escapism of like looking in.
Well, of course, you get to enjoy the look. You get to enjoy by looking at really rich and opulent things.
Yeah.
But you get that sort of very dramatic comedic line of things are so exaggerated when they're wealthy.
Yeah.
There's just this awkward tension. And you know, it sounds like there's some stuff of merit in Triangle of Sadness. The thing is about Ruben Östlund. Force Majeure is the one I really, really want to see. And it's been on my watch list for ages. And if people don't know, it was this film about a skiing holiday. This family go on the skiing holiday. And there's a very, very minor... there's an avalanche that happens, right? And this is on the poster. This is the premise of the film. And it's sort of coming down. And it starts very small. And then it becomes apparent this is going to be very big and actually has the prospect of wiping out the entire ski lodge.
Yeah.
And the father of the family just grabs his phone and leaves and runs.
Right.
But then the avalanche diverts into actually something very minor. So he's made this massive gesture of basically abandoning his family, but the disaster didn't happen. So everyone's like, why did you just
left?
And it was remade into, I think, a really bad Will Ferrell comedy called Downhill with Julie Louis-Dreyfus in it as well.
Right, okay.
Which came out just before COVID, so that's why no one remembers it.
Okay.
So he made that, and that's the one I really want to see, because that's like examining the role of men and masculinity and insecurity in a really funny way. Then he made The Square, which I have seen, which has Klaus Bang in it, who's great in like The Northman and stuff, but I found a real slog as well.
Right.
The longer it went on, the harder I found it to be. It's got that great scene I talked about before with Terry Notary in it as this sort of art piece, walking ape, and he disturbs this really rich dinner. Great ideas and great moments, but I think you're right. Ruben Östlund like just keeps seeing how much he can get away with in terms of how much he can test the audience, and there's a jumping off point.
So that's interesting, because like coming out of this, I'm like, I actually really like this director's touch. I'd be interested to go and see like not quite this, but like what else have you done that I could jump into? But like hearing that that's maybe slightly par for the course is maybe slightly less encouraging. And like again, really good ideas. Like there's this, I knew this is in the trailer, but there's this thing that happens where everyone on the cruise gets horrific food poisoning, and there's just this wonderful idea that like, that is a really great leveler, no matter how many zeros you have in the bank. If you've got food poisoning, it's coming out. Yeah. And it's just like such a great idea. And then like people are just being sick from both ends, like all over this boat. And someone runs up and people are sitting in this dining hall and just throws up and sick, splats all over the window. And even though like the staff just have to maintain that everything's okay, and you just see this wiper just immediately like, come on. And like again, the couple played by Harris Dickinson and Shelby Dean Creek are just really funny. And there's moments where like they're playing it so straight. And even in the third act, they have interactions where I'm like, I'm really bored, but like that moment for what you guys have been through is really funny.
Okay, so there you have it. So a mixed bag of ingredients, but really maybe see it. If you've seen it, let us know your thoughts. I always find the Palme d'Or winner is always divisive. A funny one. I mean, like Parasite one, which is obviously fantastic, but like usually I find the Palme d'Or winner has like, it wins because it makes a very good point. The film is usually about something, and it's a really interesting look at that one issue, but it might be a very flawed look at that issue.
And I will say, you know, we talked about, you know, it's a satirization of the ultra wealthy, and we're seeing that quite a lot. Again, when you're doing that, and there's so many other ways that people are commenting on that, I'm a little bit like, yes, you're doing that, and I've seen this now. It's like, what's your take on it? I know it's very cathartic to see rich people struggling and to see them like, you know, reduced to nothing but what they have on them. You're not very good in your Gucci loafers when you're stranded somewhere, right? And that's very cathartic to watch. But like, what now have you got to say? So I wouldn't be surprised if someone lets me know and says, actually, James, you missed the point. It's actually about X, Y, and then also Z, and you've not really commented on that. And that may be true. Maybe I missed something. I cannot take away from the fact that I think it's a really long slog and it's a slightly distracted film.
Cool. Well, let us know if you've seen Triangle of Sadness. Send us your thoughts to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. And we'll
read them out on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, George, let's go through some of the emails that we got this week. Declan writes into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com, just like you can. He says, hello to the Pulp Kitcheners.
Hello, Declan.
Name for the fans. I've been loving your thoughts on film ever since I started listening.
I think I would like maybe Pulp Kitchenettes.
Because it's like a kitchenette.
That makes sense. Are you a Pulp Kitchenette? Yeah. Or just a kitchenette? Oh, I'm a kitchenette. I'm a Pulp Kitchenette.
But kitchenette is almost like a French feminine of something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it
not
works.
that I care, but it does work.
Kitchener reminds me of like Lord Kitchener, from World War I, who did the "We need you." The Kitchen. No, let's do Kitchener. I like that.
I've been loving your thoughts on film ever since I started listening about a month ago. And as an early career writer-director myself, I'm fascinated by stories and how they are told. First off, earlier in the same episode, talking about She Said, it was mentioned how a viewing experience can change your thoughts on the film you see. Mine was interesting. I'm a regular at my cinema, but I'd never been to a screening where they forgot to put the film on.
What?
I went in by myself, and coincidentally, so had an actor from my uni. So we were chatting and discussing projects, as you do, cinema music in the background. Fast forward half an hour, and I had to go out and ask them to put the film on after no ads, trailers, or nothing. And he spells nothing with N-U-F-F-I-N. But honestly, it was nice to chat to my friend, and we did get a free hot dog vouchers afterwards.
Great.
I've never experienced that where the cinema actually doesn't function as a cinema.
That's ridiculous.
What followed was She Said, but I wonder how long I would sit before I would go and do something.
You got. Yeah, I mean,
I guess
half
it's
an hour's
black.
a lot.
You would go, what's going on?
Yeah. Also, it's who you're stuck with, isn't it?
Yeah. You just
You
know.
again, James. You know what? I better just check on that film.
You just know there's like a spotty teenager in the projection room.
You're
Like,
I'm so sorry.
Play spacebar. What followed was She Said, an incredible film that blew us away, even if it did ease us in with the punny studio Plan B Productions before a film with this title. The performances kept us hooked throughout, and I wasn't sure about the runtime before, but we were glued to the screen swiftly and really felt the anxiety and pain of the protagonists we followed. I loved the details of watching how life around them was still trudging on despite their huge story that they were unraveling from history. I thought that it already happened. I forgot that it had already happened. There was a risk to this predetermined story all of a sudden as I was really into this film. For me, the fact that I didn't see it alone and in the end and connected with someone beforehand gave me a sense of I see myself in you as the protagonist looked to connect to the women that can allow for real change and real truth to emerge. Like any struggle, it's a journey we should help each other through. It felt truly powerful. I agree. Yeah, I feel exactly the same thing about what I mentioned in my review. Like it really does grip you and you're there for the whole time, and I think it's just fantastic at holding your attention.
Great.
Question for you both. What's the last film you saw that gave you a sense of power in its filmmaking and story? Something that made you question a few things about the world, perhaps? Usually I prefer fantasy or strange characters, but sometimes real life can take us on quite a trip, and that was this. Thanks for reading and putting out absolutely quality podcasts. Much appreciation. Declan. George, a film that has given you a sense of power in its filmmaking or story, or something that's made you question something? A few things about the world.
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
A broad question. Do you mean a film that has shown me a subject matter that I've gone, that's very interesting, that's really changed me? Or is it the way a film has been made that has made me think that's changed my
My first instinct would be a really good Black Mirror concept where I've gone, I know not a film, but I've gone,
Don't worry, darling. No,
yeah.
I don't know, but the one I always talk about is Dark Waters, which was this film which was made by Todd Haynes with Mark Ruffalo in it, and it came out just before COVID, and because it was about a very, very scandalous about a scandalous corruption thing that massively affects all human health on the planet. Because it happened just before COVID, as soon as COVID hit, people didn't have the headspace to sort of talk about it. And it's about water contamination.
Similarly dope sick. But
a series that... Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So, there's a whole sub-genre there of whistleblowing, uncovering massive scandals. So Dark Waters, though, is just one of those ones that I think is... when you see a film, you think, that was really good and that was really solid. But it was so solid in a way that I was like, it's almost high art in the way that it was so solidly put together.
Yeah.
Like people say they've been talking about it and they're like, it's so, everything is deliberate and well paced. Todd Haynes is this very sort of usually quite artistic and very creative, very colourful director, and he made this very restrained film. And it's like, it's deliberately restrained because it's trying to tell this very hard story. Similarly dope sick, you come away and you think, which is this Hulu series, but it's on Disney Plus in the UK, which just makes you sort of real.
And it's so dry and obvious how that happens. It's like it's
about the OxyContin epidemic.
and you can believe it, but it doesn't make what you're seeing any more tragic and heartbreaking and just really sad. Strong recommend. Thanks for writing.
Did you have an answer? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just go with those. Next one is from Sadie, who writes into the show and says, "Hi guys, second time writing in, and I'm almost caught up on all the episodes. Pulp Kitchen was my second most listened to podcast this year, though I'm certain if I had discovered you a little bit earlier, it would be the first. I'll do better next year." Thanks, Sadie. Thank you. I was wondering what some of your favorite movie scores and soundtracks are. I always think it is interesting and fun to look at the music composed specifically for films, as well as the songs they choose to incorporate. Some of my favorite scores soundtracks are The Incredibles and About Time. More recently, I also love the music in The Batman. I think that Something in the Way by Nirvana was such a perfect choice for that film. Curious to hear some of your favorites and your thoughts. Hope you're both doing well, and thank you for all the great content, Sadie. Yeah.
Well, look, we have had similar questions to this before, but it's a great question, and so we will do it again. I actually have a note on my phone.
Try and answer differently.
That gives these
Jurassic Park.
Okay, well, no. First of all, I want to make the distinction between soundtrack and score.
Oh, yes, very different things.
Very different things. So if we're going to talk...
She says favourite movie scores and soundtracks.
So if we're going to do soundtracks, which obviously is using other artists' music, usually pop culture references, that kind of thing, to put in there, I would... So many you can choose from, but the two that I feel like I've had most sort of rotation, first is obviously Guardians of the Galaxy, because I mentioned that because that not only does that, it's just a great collection of songs, but that's one of the times the soundtrack is actually an emotional device within the film itself.
Yeah,
it's not just music playing around. It's not even that it's just in the world. It's like if the mixtape,
and it establishes the mixtape is into the Walkman.
Exactly,
he presses play.
It is a emotional. It's emotionally connected to the story of that film. The other one is a strange one. It is Drive. And I say it's strange because that only has 5 soundtrack songs in it before it becomes the score by Cliff Martinez, I think, right? But when I saw Drive when I was 17, I was the right age to see it. And I remember for the rest of the time when I saw it, when I was still at school, I was just listening to those 5 tracks. And they're 5 very random tracks. You've got that great Kavinsky song. You've got the Desire song. And then you've got the, Real Hero by College, I think, and then was it Electric Youth? I don't know. And then you've got that Riz Ortolani song, which is like, "Oh my love." Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
And then it ends with "Tick of the Clock" by the Chromatics. It's just a great 5 tracks there. And then I never really listened to the soundtrack because the score rather, because it's very sort of minimal. But those two in particular. Obviously, any Tarantino soundtrack is brilliant.
It immediately just becomes engulfed by that film.
But, and then scores, we have mentioned a lot of these before, but I will say Interstellar, obviously, Hans Zimmer. Social Network, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, obviously. I will give a shout out to Blonde because the soundtrack in that was wild.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Phantom Thread by Johnny Greenwood, anything by Johnny Greenwood. Jackie and Nocturnal Animals, which we've spoken about before.
Yeah.
That would be mine. James, anything?
I'm trying to think of stuff I haven't said. I'll give James Newton Howard from The Village, though film is flawed. That score is incredible. A lot of Thomas Newman stuff I like. And then just the soundtrack one that's coming to mind, I want to give a shout out to the song that plays you out of Good Time, the Iggy Pop.
Oh, well,
Damn, like when a song really just takes you home out of a film and gives you that almost like slow but like somber finish. It's a really good finishing of the... Yeah, I've mentioned Revolutionary Road, which is also Thomas Newman. I'm trying to think of there's Man of Steel, Hans Zimmer. Oh my God, that's that. Firstly, trying to tackle the original Superman score and make something distinct, different, and also as good as what was done before, I think is really hard job. And I think that score became immediately iconic. And it's when that score comes in any of the other worst movies, I'm always like, that's my favorite part of Justice League when they played that song from Man of Steel.
Also, just whilst we're talking about like soundtracks and scores, I was thinking about HBO shows, obviously very good.
Yeah.
They all have great sounds. Great theme tunes. I mean, great composing and music throughout.
White Lotus.
But it's typified by the theme tunes. White Lotus, fantastic opening track. Succession, great opening track. Game of Thrones. Like, those 3 iconic, highly distinctive theme tunes that people then enter pop culture, being used in videos, TikToks, whatever.
Yeah.
And obviously the subsequent music that's used throughout the show on those ones are brilliant. But I just realized, I was like, my God. And then The Sopranos, Curb Your Enthusiasm, all these shows have just fantastic musical identities. Anyway.
So many. And I love it when a film introduces you to an artist you've never heard before and you're just like, oh,
like 500 Days of Summer.
Like 500 Days of Summer. Oh, do you know what I like? I liked when Euphoria did Sinead O'Connor, and they brought her in for that. Not Nothing Compares to You. It was Drink Before the War. Like, that was such a beautiful comparison between it. And he's just like, there's things to talk about. And then you just get that chorus.
That's a raw song, isn't it? That's
amazing song. I remember just like watching that and be like, oh my God, this film's really going
Euphoria
for
actually
it.
has loads of needle drops.
It's fantastic. Like the hip hop and like the synth.
They also, the first episode, sorry, we'll go on to the next question, but the first episode they play it muffled in the background. You know the song Hold Up by Beyonce, right?
Yeah.
They play the Andy Williams original track from the 60s, the dum, 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 dum.
Yeah.
Can't get used to it. And then they cut it when the title hits with the Hold Up. Then,
I can think if you just let us go without any structure, we would just do this for like 40 minutes. So
I hope that answered your question.
Basically, there are loads.
Yeah.
This next one is from Lucy. Lucy writes into the show. She writes into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. She says, hey, boys. Just listening to your latest episode 53, about the BFI greatest films of all time list. If you didn't know, we went through what the BFI in Sight and Sound defined as the new decennial list. And George sort of very nicely broke them down and sort of put them in that list. You can go and listen to that if you want to see what those were. She says, I had a look through and hopefully, like most people, I was surprised that I hadn't seen or even heard of most of them. I decided I might try very slowly, working my way through the list. But as I was browsing the titles and descriptions, I started to wonder how important you think context is when watching a film. For example, context at the time the film was released, context on reception, context on the director or the film style. Do you think having this sort of knowledge beforehand improves the watching experience, or does it ruin it? Or does it simply depend on the film? Sometimes I watch film and I think, I didn't really get what that was all about. But after I've read up on it, I feel like I wasn't fully engaged because I was maybe missing some context that would have helped me to appreciate it more. Hope this makes sense. Would love to hear your thoughts. As always, love the podcast. Thanks, Lucy.
Great question, because when you were reading that out, I was finding myself hard agreeing with both.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about historical films, like the BFI list, the Sight and Sound list presents, context is absolutely key to understanding why it's important, and the world it was created in, and informing just knowing that just because that is a film then, and we have films now, does not mean they were made in the same landscape at all, right? However, I am also someone who, not only do I try and limit the amount of trailers I watch, the information I know about a film before I go in to see it, even if I watch an old film, I sometimes think, look, as long as I just know the gist of it, who's in it, and the sort of like consensus about it, if there's just why people think it's good, I want that film sorry, not the consensus about it, that's the context. I mean, without that, I just want to put that film on and see if that film still works for me as a 2022 member of the audience, okay? Yeah. Because often they won't. And that's not saying that film is bad. It's like, can I watch this film as out of context as I would with a modern film, and would it still work? Because if it does work, that's the sign for me that that's a good film. If I can put, like a couple of Christmases ago, I put on the Waterfront, right? The Marlon Brando film. Right? That's 1952, it's a bloody long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I put it on and it still worked. And I was like, great, I didn't know. All I knew was Marlon Brando was in it, and then I knew the little speech in it. But that is key. Now, I think almost context comes into it if you don't engage with the film. So if I'd seen On the Waterfront, I thought, that didn't really click with me. I would then think, okay, well, I need to look up why people hold this so dearly. And then you can read up a bit. And then if you think, you either think, that's changed my mind, I might have missed something. Or you think, no, I've read that, but I still think my opinion is valid. So in a way, I'm saying context can matter and is sometimes incredibly crucial, but it's still okay to just go into watching a film directly and plainly. I think. Do you think that's unfair? Do you think it's unfair to go and watch? If they say, Gene Dealman is number one, so I'm just going to whack on Gene Dealman. That film's rubbish. Well, it's only rubbish because you didn't realize it was a 3.5-hour Belgian film about the mundane details of her life. If you'd known that going in, maybe you would have had a different reaction. I don't know.
Hearing that question made me think about a practice that you and I have tried to be a lot better at when doing this podcast, is that whenever you and I want to go into a deep discussion about an old film, it's very disorienting and slightly jarring to all of a sudden go a deep dive into an old film without the proper context of why we're talking about it, why
we
it's
did with Avatar.
Exactly like we've done with Avatar. So me and George will go, okay, we're going to watch this. One of us should do just a little bit of an in for people so they know it was 2009. This was the cultural landscape. This is what came out around it. This is why this film was big, which really helps inform someone about the opinion that they're about to hear. And I feel like it can be slightly reductive to just be like, Avatar is this out of nowhere, because you're like, wait, what? We also had a discussion, I want to say it could have been over a year ago now, where we talked about the practice of going through a bunch of films and almost like binging them back to back. And in so many ways, that's a really useful practice because you get to see lots of things in quick succession. But we use this analogy of like going through the greatest 100 paintings all time in a slideshow and just flashing them to you. And yes, you've technically seen the best paintings in the world, but did you actually understand who made it? What was the artist going through when they made it? What literal thing are they depicting? And I think that's really important. So in so many ways, I'm the same as George. I agree and disagree. Like by all means, like try and really understand what you're trying to watch. Try and get to know what other films that director's done. What was the actor doing when they did that? What are some of like the great stories from that production that really informed why that film is special? Because that's often things you never really realize. Like the reason why that shot is so amazing is because they only had this. They had this limitation on it, and that's why it's something that makes it so great.
And actually, I think you're right. The more we talk about it, the more I'm leaning towards that context is absolute key. And that because it's equally knowing that that shot that they did, or that dialogue that they used, or that thing they did was actually a reference or a rip-off of a film 20 years ago. Or that this version of this film has been done much better previously before. So context is key, but also context can be incredibly fruitful and a nice way to really engage them, because when you look at the top 5, sometimes these lists, as much as celebrating films, can flatten them into just being numbers, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at all those 5 films that were the top 5, which I believe were Gene Dealman, Vertigo, Citizen Kane, Tokyo Story, and In the Mood for Love, those are actually 5 completely different films made by completely different people in different, well, I was going to say different time periods, but 3 of those I think from the 50s. So context is a fruitful way of actually celebrating all those differences. So instead of picking up Tokyo Story because I was about to say Toy Story, picking up Tokyo Story, great film, because it's number 4 on the science sound list. No, it should be like, I want to watch Tokyo Story because it's this product of a time in Japanese cinema where things are really interesting and it really caught the attention of the West because of this. And then go watch it. And if you don't like it, that's fine.
It's like the same as like that 100,001 films to see before you die. What, you're going to like reduce Citizen Kane to 4 sentences in a coffee table book and expect someone to like it? It's a good question.
Good question.
Watch as many films as you can.
Just keep watching people, and
Richard writes into the show and says, Sadie, Lucy. But Lucy, thank you very much for that question. Very interesting conversation. This next one is from Richard, who says, hello, James and George. First-time writer into the pod, but long-time listener. I found you both on
TikTok.
And I have devoured.
You have devoured?
I devoured your entire back catalogue in no time. I eagerly await each episode and loved what you've done with the pod. You both are easily my favourite film podcast. I even found
the praise. It keeps coming. Oh my goodness!
I found, even though I do disagree with you some of the time, I find you are both respectful of other people's opinions, but yet put your opinions across in a way that's like poetry. It's great to hear you talk film, and I eagerly await each episode. Richard, you are too kind.
Very
Thank
kind.
you.
I feel a bit indulgent that we've even read that out, really, to be honest.
Having heard your thoughts on Amsterdam, it delayed my watch till it came on Disney+. Plus.
Yes.
Now that I've seen the film, I have to say it's made my top 15 of the year.
Oh, right.
The film for me fits into that tiny subgenre of wandering detective stories. I guess you could call it very much in the vein of The Big Lebowski and Inherent Vice, where the story is often sometimes incoherent or inconsequential, but very much the characters that take you on the ride. I've seen a lot of divisive comments about these films, and I have to say it's a subgenre that I love. What would be a subgenre or genre of film that you connect to, but you find many others don't?
Okay, first of all, to answer about Amsterdam, great to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think James and I had that thing that we had a good experience seeing it, and I think the more the time has taken since we've seen it, we can both agree that it was well acted, good looking nonsense.
Yes.
I think that point about the wandering detective story is perfectly valid. It makes perfect sense. I mean, I really, really struggled with Inherent Vice, even though I love Paul Thomas Anderson. The Big Lebowski, though, I kind of hold differently, because The Big Lebowski is coherent enough and it's funny. It's really funny. That's what holds that film together.
Any subgenres that you're a fan of?
Okay, well, I love time travel films that take time travel into a different sort of like, realm, like Looper or About Time even, or like Predestination.
You just close your eyes.
Yeah, I just bloody love time travel. And then when they hammer it in and put it into a different like context, I'm just like, oh, how lovely. I think I'm also a sucker for slightly doomed, tragic couples. See Before Trilogy, see 45 Years, see Brief Encounter. Films like that, I think, are really up my street. They don't all work. I mean, like Lost in Translation, like I like, it's not up my top ones, but like those, if I see a film that's on that kind of like Columbus, another one, I'm like, oh, another way of a different way of musing on male-female relationships, or even just like the relationships between two people. That's your subgenre. That's my kink. That's my niche.
I'd say when I get excited, which isn't, this will be a lot of people's, but anytime they go to court, it's
really?
It's the intellectual let's go to war. I just rub my hands together, like Few Good Men, People versus OJ, like even Liar Liar. I would say like that. It just builds towards it. Trial of the Chicago 7. Like it just is this amazing. And I don't know how, but films always manage to make what is easily the most boring part of the legal system the most exciting.
It's nothing like that in real life.
Like Denial.
Yes,
The Lincoln Lawyer.
Denial. My goodness,
Yes.
my goodness, that's a very underrated film. Move on.
Any TV show, People versus OJ especially, I think was just. It was like the second half of that show is just the trub. But I rub my hands together. I go, let's go for it. Intellectual war.
My girlfriend's studying to be the barrister, and so I showed her Liar Liar. Which is great. But I also, have you watched My Cousin Vinny? See, that's a law drama. And that's really funny. That's really good still. Yeah. Really, I enjoyed that.
So that's my one when that happens. I'm like, but look, it's that subgenre. It's kind of big.
No, I like that.
Kill a Mockingbird.
Of course.
Yeah. This last one is
12 Angry Men.
Yeah, 12 Angry Men.
Not
but still, culminating in a
Battle of Minds.
Yes, it's like changing decisions, revelations.
The Crucible.
Yes.
I mean, again, not a courtroom, but similar.
You can't handle the truth.
Few Good Men.
Yes. This last one. Let me just read this one. This last one is from Luke, who says, "Hi, James and George. Hope you're both doing well. Big fan of the podcast. Went to go see Armageddon Time on your recommendation. Thought it was absolutely fantastic. Completely took me by surprise. Yeah, go check out the Armageddon Time review."
Yeah, can I actually just make a point on that? Because I went and saw Armageddon Time.
You saw it as well.
On your recommendation.
Yeah.
And I was really, really impressed with Armageddon Time. And I want to flag it again because it's that film didn't get a lot of attention. I think people should really see it. The first third, I was kind of like, okay, I don't know whether I'm not sure I'm with this that much. But the longer it went on, particularly in the second half, what I really found was like this film is so emotionally complex.
Yeah.
It was like a novel. I was just like this. I'm feeling so conflicted and so many different emotions about the characters and all the things they're working with, and the ideas that film is working with towards the end, I think are really interesting, heartbreaking, like quite bleak in a way, very personal. And I was like, you know what, like it might not work for a lot of people, this film, but I just think that really stood out as a unique perspective and a unique voice. What an interesting take.
I hope it doesn't go past people too much, because I think like you could boil down the dialogue to something that's said is very simple, but I think like the subtext behind it is so dark and interesting and complex and exciting. And it's like I had so many different thoughts that I had from my own predisposed idea of what they might be talking about, and it's very hard to sort of boil down. I think so. In like I think that film really uplifted for me. No, it's not uplifting necessarily at all, but like that film began like, okay, and it really came together. I love it when a film comes together to the end, to the point where you then look at the whole completely differently. Great Anthony Hopkins, great Jeremy Strong, great Anne Hathaway. Sorry, good opportunity for go
you
and
to
check
talk
it out
about
on Again Time if you haven't. I wanted to ask your opinions on HFR brackets high frame rate screenings. With the release of Avatar 2, I can see James Cameron once again pushing the boundaries of cinema screening technology. I, like most film nerds, are fairly lukewarm about Avatar. However, I definitely want to go see it purely to see whether or not it can live up to the success of the first one. It'll be one of the few excuses to go all out on seeing it in the best way possible, e.g. Dolby, IMAX, etc. Otherwise, what's the point? Kind of
I
fair.
get you,
Now look, I'm happy to see the back of 3D technology being thrusted into every film in the early 2010s, but with Avatar, I'll make an exception I'll make an exception for, because it basically revitalized the format. Yeah. Whilst I'm in the mood for giving niche screen technologies a chance, I'm also seeing options to watch it in HFR. I've not yet ventured into the world of high frame rate screenings. Can you elaborate on what, if any, improvement it has on the viewing experience? Is it a distracting gimmick like 3D for most movies? Should I bother seeking out an HFR screening? Do you have a particular opinion or personal experience on whether or not HFR is any good? I enjoy how you've both romanticized the cinema-going experience in previous episodes and figured you'd be able to point me in the right direction. I look forward to the podcast every week. Just wish you guys would do more content, but I know you're busy with those jobs of yours. Thanks.
Thank
Luke.
you. I mean, we'd love to. We absolutely would love to, but we already so many hours a day, and we do a lot, and there are other things.
Got to see all the films, the 4-hour Avatar films.
Look, I do have some stuff on high frame rate, but this is really your area of expertise. I think you can speak to this a lot more than I can.
So high frame rate. So basically, what we so as a I've got a lot of things going on. As a cinematographic video making community around the world, as a lot of you all know, we all kind of agreed, for both creative reasons and practical reasons, that we should film 24 frames per second.
Well, as Toby Jones says in the trailer for Empire of Light, which I've seen upcoming, he says there's a flaw in your retina, in your retinal feedback in your eye. That means that at 24 frames per second, you don't see the gaps between the individual images, and it produces the illusion of movement.
Exactly. And it's actually 23.967 frames per second, which we round up colloquially to 24. So this is done for both aesthetic reasons, because we would say that you literally practically need to introduce so many frames per second to introduce the motion of movement, right? It also has, we think that in terms of motion blur and how much movement looks natural without becoming too fluid, we've all just agreed 24 is the standard. It also has a very practical application. If all of us around the world are shooting the same frame rate, when I want to put a bit of my video and a bit of your video, it syncs up, the audio's not a mess, it just works. If you want to put something on TV, we all shot the same frame rate, right?
And also, doesn't it have a historical background in actual film stock?
Also, from a practical cost perspective, you don't want to shoot more frames per second than you need to, because it costs you money to have film reels. So the more frames per second you're shooting, you need to buy more film. And yes, all of those reasons that would have related to actual celluloid. When you shoot in a higher frame rate, typically it means that you're shooting in slow motion. When you shoot more frames per second, you're capturing more frames. And when you play that back at the same speed, you've got slow motion, because you've captured more in the same amount of time. So if you shoot in 48 frames per second, you're shooting at half speed. A lot of football is also shot at like 100 frames a second as well. So at any moment they can go, that goal, I want to see that in a quarter of the speed to see it going, right? All films, typically, and look, I want to say these rules and laws, inverted commas, of filmmaking are of course there, but like all of the great filmmakers have traditionally used those rules and then broken them to do something which is typically very good. Okay, so a high frame rate film, the ones that I have seen are shot in 48 frames per second instead of 24. So you double the frame. And what illusion that has is it creates a more, what some would say, lifelike, fluid, almost like dreamlike effect on the film. Phil, I saw the first two Hobbits in high frame rate, and I think it kind of works, but mostly my instinct is it kind of looks a little bit gross. Kind of looks like watching the news, because the news is at 30 as far as I'm aware, and it just looks a bit real and a bit sitcom-y.
It makes everything look like a set, doesn't it?
Yes.
It
behind the scenes.
Distorts the dimensions so much that you think you're, you say behind the scenes footage,
like I almost want to be like, let's just stick to 24, because I think you see it and you go, oh, this is weird. This is all off. The motion is weird. I feel like I start to see things like makeup and wigs really clearly.
Don't give your brain more information than it needs to process something that's already an illusion. Otherwise your brain's being told, well, this is more than just illusion, that you're just seeing hyper reality.
I think when it comes to things like immersive experiences, VR, more frames the better. Like make it as fluid as what would be real life. For a film like Avatar 2, maybe that's what you want. My like official James Brief for PULP Kitchen recommendation is I wouldn't seek it out unless you're really curious. I would always prioritize like color depth over resolution and frame rate, because your eyes are far more sensitive to color than they are to like sharpness and motion. So like that would be like a Dolby or an IMAX, where like color reproduction is the best. So that's kind of explaining what it is and whether or not you're interested.
I think that there's some sort of inherent cinema magic that was born in the birth of cinema with the fact they did 24 frames per second.
Yes.
And I think you don't need to play with that.
And you're
I'm not
just
saying you
used
can't
to-
innovate. Great to give it a try, but I think it's. I really don't want them to push it as like a.
Without knowing, you are already so used to watching things at 24 frames per second. You just know that that's what content video is. So as soon as you take that away, you're going to go, oh, that's odd. That looks strange. And you're probably going to be distracted from the film. I'm not going to say like it's bad, don't do it. Filmmakers shouldn't, because who am I to say that they shouldn't break the rules? But I would go. I imagine James Cameron shot it in 48 frames in 3D. I can't even imagine what that camera looks like. It must just look like a fridge. It just must be the biggest thing in the world.
James Cameron is so like advanced with his idea of technology. I bet he'll be like, no, we went to Pandora and we filmed this. It's an actual planet. We just built the ship and we went. Like, that's how far ahead he is.
Like, and you know what? I kind of agree with you. Like, of all the films to try and find out, let's get all the bells and whistles. This is probably it.
Custom made for specific.
Custom
Like we
made.
talked before about how Avatar was
Literally.
made for 3D.
And I believe that of all the films to do it, this is probably the one that will do it right.
So give it a punt.
Give it a go. See how you feel that. Watch something in 48 frames per second and see if it makes you feel a bit sick. I heard it makes people feel a bit sick just because you're not used to it. But there you go. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Again, it's a rule, it's a law, but who's to say who can't break it?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Luke.
Very interesting questions, everyone, today. Thank you
Great
so much.
questions. Keep them coming in. If you wanted to send a question into the show, you can do by emailing hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com and we'll read them out on the show. Thank you as always for writing in. So, George, one of my favourite games is easily one of our stupidest games, and is why I like it so much, and it is Film Opposites.
Sure.
This game, if you've seen it or if you've heard it before, I will read the opposite title of a film, and George has to tell me what that film is based on its antonyms. So, for example, Square of Happiness would be Triangle of Sadness, which I just reviewed. There you go. So, George, I've got 2 rounds for you. You have to guess the film based on its opposite film title. Oh, just to say, like, obviously, square isn't the opposite of triangle. But I know, you get the point.
You get the gist, yeah.
I see the comments.
Yeah, we know, guys, we know. But don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, okay?
Thank you. It's all about having fun. George, you have to guess the film based on its opposite film title. Okay. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Peace Pony.
Warhorse.
Departure.
Arrival.
Hot Valley.
Cold Mountain. What a throwback.
The First Ninja.
The Last Samurai. Samurai Ninja? Opposite? Okay.
Good Girls.
Bad Boys.
Jenny French.
Jenny French. Johnny English.
Mortgage.
Rent.
He's the woman.
She's the man.
Your Unjust Gentleman.
My best. Unjust. Oh, say that again.
Your Unjust Gentleman.
My something woman.
My Fair Lady. The Tiger, the Wizard, and the Chest of Drawers.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Embodied Here.
Disembodied Now.
Spirited Away. It's kind of niche.
Yeah.
Normal Inactivity.
Paranormal Activity.
Pret-a-manger, the Amateur.
What? The Pret-a-manger, the...
Leon, the Professional.
Oh! So stupid. By fast food chains out. Oh.
That's a London reference.
London-centric cafe lunchtime.
Do you know what? Like, these are as fun to make as they are to do. Like, I'm literally like laughing in the corner, just making these ridiculous.
I love it.
Pret-a-manger, the Amateur.
You reach. You stretch
Just
for that.
go
You go
for
for it. Oh, okay. Right, round.
I thought Mortgage Rent was good.
Yeah.
Because if you're not paying your mortgage, you're paying rent. Ready? Last round. You have to guess the film based on its opposite film title. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Adult Passenger.
Baby Driver.
Ignore You by My Number.
Call You by My Name.
Call
Me by Your Name.
It's an Awful Death.
It's a Wonderful Life.
The Blue Kilometer.
The Green Mile.
Yeah. Russian Future Y.
Russian Future Y. American Past. What?
American History X.
Oh.
To Save a Pigeon.
To save a pigeon. To catch a thief. No, to save a rat. Something about a rat.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh.
Outside In.
Inside Out.
Smooth.
Rough. Rough. Road. Rough.
Rocky.
The
The Science of Dialogue.
The science of dialogue, the myth of the talking, the science of dialogue.
Sorry, the silence of dialogue.
Oh, the silence of dialogue, the noise, the sound of music.
Yes. Lawful sailors of the Mediterranean.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
And there we have another
Christ.
round of the stupidest game that we do. Guess
The stupidest,
film
and in a way,
based on its opposite film.
smartest.
So, yeah, like, I think some of them are
there's
a good
nothing wrong
tickle.
with dumb. That is a good solid bit
Thank
of
you,
fun.
Sporkle, for the reference.
A dumb game that makes me feel dumb as well, because I can't believe I didn't get some of those.
But like 3 hours later, you'll be on the tube and you'll just be like...
What a funny one.
Guys, thank you so much for listening
Yes.
to another episode of Pulp Kitchen. We really do appreciate your time. We're sorry this one is a bit late. Just planned to...
Yes.
Due to
Sorry, we're a
scheduling
bit late.
and-
It was it's the time, and there's
Just is the time of the
snow,
year.
train strikes,
All of that.
the World Cup,
Just the world falling
the
apart.
world in general. No, let's leave it on a good note, James.
On a
Positive.
good
note. Keep going to the cinema. Keep enjoying films. Let us know if there's things you've seen that you
Going
really
to do
enjoy.
Avatar too soon. We've got some fun end of the year stuff for
Yes.
you. Not going to say what it is yet, but should hopefully be some nice looking ahead, looking back, bit of this, bit of that. Yeah. Stay tuned for everything Pulp Kitchen towards the end of the year. We will not leave you over the holiday break.
Absolutely not. And as ever, guys, you know to follow us on TikTok, follow us on Instagram, give us a like and give us a subscribe. If you're already doing that, but you're like, wait a minute, I have YouTube. I don't really follow these guys on YouTube. Or I don't even have a YouTube account. You can just quickly do one. If you have Gmail, you probably
Make
have a
one.
YouTube account.
Grammar!
Make one. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Check us out. And we'd really appreciate it.
If you want to see like videos of us going to fun premieres, doing cool things, anything like that, follow on our socials.
Yeah.
Just comment, chat to you back.
Love
It'll be
it.
great. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.